Okay, we'll start in the last session for today. For those who had missed my previous session, I'm still Dmitry Yemanov. And this session is about Firebird development efforts performed this year and planned for the next year, what releases are scheduled by the team, and what features and technology ideas Firebird gets during this period of time. First of all, I would like to talk about Firebird team maintenance plan, what we plan to do with Firebird versions already released. First of all, Firebird 1.5 series is still being supported. It doesn't get all the fixes we could backport. It's only supported in terms of security fixes and serious corruption fixes, but still Firebird 1.5 is supported. The past version was Firebird 1.5.5 the past year, and this year one more version will be released. So one point release a year.
Embora não seja importado pelas posições que são feitas no 2, são apenas adicionativas à segurança ou problemas de execução de dados. Esse ano houve a geração de um ponto importante e esse ano já mais de segundo a gente a inovação
As for Firebird 2.0 and 2.1 releases, they are maintained more actively. They get all kinds of bug fixes, some performance improvements. For example, we are solving some performance regressions that were reported to us. And these two Firebird versions are being ported to new platforms. Firebird 2.0.4 release has been made earlier this year, and the next point release is expected to be released later this year. And the Firebird 2.1 series has also had the first point release has just been made a few days ago, and the next point release is also scheduled for later this year. Okay, I believe that most important features of the Firebird 2.1 release, as already mentioned, the Firebird Developer Day here in Brazil the past year. So I will not explain a lot of details about this, just to enumerate the most important ones. database triggers, merge statement, global temporary tables, common table expressions, recursive queries, a lot of new built-in functions you were asking for during the past years, fixed and improved Unicode handling, full compatibility between strings and text blobs. We have offered you monitoring tables and query cancellation facilities and other things. The network protocol has been optimized, and maybe some of the mostly important things is that a lot of bug fixes, more than 150 has been fixed in this release. It's very important for us. But since this Firebird version has been released, we have been reported about a number of bugs in this release. Well, you know this always happens with the software. And it was our major priority to address all these issues as soon as possible, and this is why the first point release has appeared a few days ago. It has all the known issues solved. Now, a few words about future Firebird version. This slide is titled Revolution or Evolution. Which way should Firebird choose to implement the future abilities, mostly including the multi-threading? As you know, Firebird team has promised to have full multi-threading support in Firebird version 3, and we are going this way for more than 2 years already. But there are different ways to achieve that goal. The first way, a more revolutionary one, has been performed by James Starkey within the Vulkan branch. He started with a super server codebase, and he was working on the multi-threading abilities to synchronize the shared caches properly and so on. But it required a lot of changes global code refactoring, many new implementations, and everything has been done without proper public testing. And this experience showed us the most important problems. In this way, it has been proven to not really being achievable in a short amount of time. So the Firebird team has decided to choose a bit different way.
Isso exigiu grande mudança no quadro, agora isso também, e isso tudo foi feito sem que houvesse teste físico no máximo de pessoas. O que a experiência demonstrou é que não é viável fazer esse tipo de mudança no produto do tempo.
But of course it doesn't mean that the Vulkan branch is considered dead. No. But its code parts are being merged into the Firebird head branch one by one, properly analyzed, properly tested. So the merge is really happening. It just go in a bit different way than we expected a few years earlier.
Isso quer dizer que o Vulkan é novo, na realidade, que tem tudo de suporte realizado e parte do evento sendo distribuída no Firebird em pedaços menores, realizados, e que foi de uma forma que é diferente daquilo que foi imaginado no passado. Mas
so Firebird has decided to go an evolutional path to achieve the same goal. Instead of just spending many years trying to debug a completely new engine, we have decided to move in steps, port some parts incrementally and implement some abilities ourselves, test properly, and be able to release at least once a year stable intermediate versions containing different improvements in both multi-threading and just other SQL features. We don't want to leave you without a new versions for a few years.
Isso vem feito e a ideia é que essa versão nova, uma vez por ano, incluindo na parte de totalmente, assim como outros recursos de IDEias, para que não fiquem vários anos sem ter uma versão nova, vamos essa um de novo.
What are the primary development goals for this year and the next one? First of all, it's architectural rework to provide multi-threading engine that can work in different modes. Also, our major task for Firebird 3 release is a multi-threading ability, so we do implement proper thread safety and different synchronization improvements in order to scale better in the multi-threaded mode.
thread. Então, questões de suporte em geral, na organização de thread, para poder obter melhor estabilidade da aplicação.
And in order to provide you with some user-visible features as well, not only technological improvements, we are still working on the SQL language improvements, implementing more built-in functions, and so on.
Também para que vocês novos recursos que são visíveis para o usuário, tem trabalhado com novas funções, novos recursos da linguagem, para que você tenha não só uma melhoria do nosso usuário, mas também novos recursos que são utilizados para
What is actually being done by the development team in the area of multi-threading abilities?
O que foi feito já para fazer desenvolvimento na área de capacidade de
Actually, this is what mostly has already been done for the Firebird 2.5 release. I will talk about it a bit later. And some work is still being continued for Firebird 3.
Na verdade, a maior parte da trabalho já foi feito e depois a gente vai continuar fazendo esse processo.
All Firebird architectures now fully support threads, and Firebird no longer supports platforms which are internally not compatible at all, like Synix Z by Siemens.
Todas as versões do Firebird agora passam a suportar threads e o Firebird não vai suportar plataformas que não têm suporte na thread.
And finally, the Firebird client library is fully thread safe, can be used in multi-threaded applications without any external synchronization. And we implement various ways to process some internal activities asynchronously in different threads in order to benefit from these facilities of modern operating systems. But the key ideas for Firebird version 3 are shared caches. It means shared page cache, shared metadata cache, and shared compiled statements cache. The compiled statement cache doesn't exist currently in Firebird, but it will be offered quite soon in future Firebird versions.
A ideia principal para o Firebird é compartilhado, isso significa que é compartilhado páginas, metadados e de umas compiladas e que não existe atualmente, mas na em breve as coisas
You know that Super Server currently supports shared caching, but it doesn't scale, while the classic server scales really well, but it consumes a lot of resources. So the final goal for Firebird 3 is to merge these two architectures to benefit from both shared caching and multi-threaded ability and scalability.
Compartilhado, mas não tem boa probabilidade e o projeto tem boa probabilidade de ter muitos recursos da máquina. A ideia de fazer três, na verdade, é compartilhar das duas ideias, ter uma estrutura de comunicações para tirar proveito de ambas as vantagens.
What is Firebird 2.5 release is about? It's just the promised first step in our incremental path towards the Firebird 3 version. It's the first intermediate version with better multi-threading support, with some classic super server unification, just the first step in the necessary direction.
O Firebird 2.5 é o primeiro passo no caminho, e o primeiro passo na unificação da estrutura da série de trás, oferecendo melhor suporte com os threads, e vamos comprar intermediários a
what features this Firebird version offers to you? First of all, it's really multi-threaded engine, including both super server and classic. They are both still available. But the core idea of this release is to offer a bit more modern classic server incarnation. It still has private cache per user connection, but it executes it handles user connections in threads instead of processes.
Os pontos principais que a versão então a versão mas o principal é uma versão usada de classe que ainda trata o teste de uma forma isolada por promoção, mas que já trata as conexões de teste ao invés de
This release also offers improvements in areas of performance and scalability, and our tests show that it works really better in this regard than all previous Firebird versions.
Essa versão apresenta melhorias de performance e estabilidade, e os testes mostram que de fato o trabalho de forma melhor nessas dois serviços do que todas as outras versões.
And finally, this Firebird release will offer you new SQL features and monitoring table extensions, and one of its major changes, major improvements, is that it allows cross database queries.
Essa versão verá uma nova estrutura de query, e os principais recursos que é a possibilidade de construir queries que
What changes are affecting Firebird Classic Server in Firebird 2.5? First of all, Classic Server now threadable. It means that it is, while it still runs one process per user connection, it's still able, it's now able to use threads for some internal usage, for some its internal tasks. For example, services and sweep activities are now executed on threads internally.
So, para os usuários que vão para a versão 5, o trabalho se torna e agora consegue usar internamente para iniciar parte do que fazer de uma forma mais eficiente.
Also, Classic Server now uses more efficient, more modern inter-process communication mechanisms. It no longer needs to have a number of semaphores being set up in advance. The dedicated log manager redirector process is deprecated now in POSIX. So Classic becomes more modern in terms of multi-threading and IPC and other programming areas. And another feature that classic server now supports is that it processes network packets asynchronously, and thus it's able to immediately detect broken network links because of crashed client, for example, and disconnect and kill itself gracefully. The server process just terminates gracefully under this condition. No more zombie processes.
Nessas condições, o utilizador de uma forma controlada, desativo, assim, e você não tem mais capacidade de confiar há um processo que está tratamento centralizado.
What is changing for Super Server? First of all, Super Server now responds a bit better. It scales a bit better because instead of global level mutex protection for the threads inside the engine, we use a bit lower level synchronization that allows some parts of the engine working independently. It's still not what is scheduled for Firebird 3, but it's a good step forward. And also, Super Server is starting to support SMP and multi-core hardware. It doesn't support it yet fully, as we promised for Firebird 3, but if you access multiple databases in parallel simultaneously, then Super Server can really synchronize its threads quite good, and multiple databases will really be processed in parallel by different CPUs. So there are already usage cases when Super Server can be SMP friendly.
Mas que trabalha com diferentes bases de dados, funciona muito bem, e configurando diferentes bases de dados realmente acontecem em paralelo, existem casos de uso que mostram que o ambiente está um pouco mais em velocidade, e isso também em paralelo, e eles podem em várias coisas.
And regarding the embedded engine on Windows, mostly because classic server now supports threading and can be used in multi-threaded applications, and because the Firebird team has managed to resolve the known issues with database corruptions by accessing them in the shared mode from different processes, we have decided to use classic as an architecture for the embedded engine on Windows instead of Super Server used previously. And I will explain the benefits you get from them. So now the embedded engine will allow multiple processes to access, to share the same database in a really safe way. Mostly it means that you can debug your application to having both database connections from Delphi, for example, and your application running in the debugger. You can use, for example, IBXpack to work with the same database at the same time. You can use official tools like gbag, jfix, and so on, while still working with your database by your application and so on. It gives you flexibility and ability to really use the embedded engine in a quite flexible way. Firebird 2.5 also offers a so-known super classic working mode or super classic architecture. So what this means, what is super classic, and why it arrives now. Please take into account that both Super Server and regular classic engines are still available, they're still supported, and Super Classic is just some new mode to work around some limitations of Classic and to scale better if you really need better scalability, better performance. It's just one more working mode to choose from what is best for your application. Super Classic is effectively a single host server process which handles user connections in threads. But threads are not dedicated per connection, they are pooled. So even if you have quite noticeable load, a very high load, you shouldn't be worried by some system resources be used for nothing. Only the active requests occupy threads and resources. But the sad thing about Super Classic is that it still inherits cache limitations of the regular Classic. So both page cache and metadata cache are maintained per connection, thus occupying more memory that's actually necessary. But from another side, as soon as these caches will be made common in Super Classic, it will mean exactly a match between Super Classic and Super Server to produce the architecture we want to see in Firebird 3. what are the benefits of superclassic as compared to a regular classic? First of all, superclassic uses less kernel resources, but not system memory, as I explained just now, and some scalability limits exposed by the operating system. For example, I was talking about a limitation of 1,000 of connections, about 1,000 of connections in Classic on Windows. I was talking about it yesterday in my master class. This limit no longer applies to superclassic. So actually you can handle to have really high number of connections. Also, because everything now is implemented inside a single process, so there is no need in an expensive IPC communication. This, for example, causes a log manager implementation in superclassic being much more efficient, and our testing shows about 30% of performance boost just because of this thing. Of superclassic as compared to classic. And finally, superclassic shares 3 more features with Super Server. Before that, they were available only in Super Server. Now they work correctly in superclassic as well. The server, the entire server, can be safely shut down to gracefully disconnect all active connections. If you use a tray icon, for example, or service stop your service, the superclassic will handle this shutdown, service shutdown gracefully. Also, it's now possible to enumerate attached databases and attached users using the services IP API. The same way it always worked in Super Server but never worked in Classic. Now it's available in Super Classic as well. And the security database connection is also cached the same way as in Super Server, thus allowing you to connect really fast if your application depends on that. So mostly Super Classic just means the same called Classic mode, which is more scalable, which has better performance, and which is much more user-friendly because of these features inherited from super server. The major drawbacks of Super Classic, one of them is the same as a regular Classic, it's because caches are private, so the entire server occupies much more memory that could, well, it just doesn't handle memory usage very well. Well, it's the same thing as with the regular Classic. And another one is also obvious because of the single process architecture, is that if the server process will crash for whatever reason, all user connections will be affected. What is actually Super Classic from the usage point of view? On Windows, it's still the same binary as the regular Classic, FB, INET server. It should just be used with an extra switch M, which means multi-threading mode. If you use Super Classic as an application, you just provide two switches, A and M. And if you use Firebird on Windows as a service, you just install this service using the same M switch. Well, the final part of this slide is buggy. It should read as how to use it on POSIX, the last one. So, what the difference is in Linux and other Unix-like operating systems? Those platforms have a new binary, FB SMP server. Unlike the regular Classic, there is no need in the Linux system daemon for TCP connections. And the SMP server process just handles incoming connections itself the same way as a super server does. What other features are offered by Firebird 2.5? First of all, finally, an alter view statement has been implemented, and also the alter facility for computed columns has also been implemented. Also, we are offering you the new predicate similar to. It implements the SQL specification feature regarding the search for regular expressions. It can be used in where clause, on clause for joints, and so on. Also, the user management facilities are exposed to the SQL level, and 3 new DDL statements are offered: create user, alter user, and drop user. They still work with the server-side database, server global security database, but later in Firebird 3, these statements are expected to handle per database usage management as well. Another new feature which is available in the procedural SQL language is a type of column feature. It means to use, for example, you can declare a local variable using this clause so that it references to an existing table column, and its data type will be used for this variable. If any of you has tried to use a selectable procedure in the from clause inside of view, you were getting the error message that feature is not supported. Now, in Firebird 2.5, procedure-based views are fully supported. Another new feature that this Firebird version offers you is autonomous transactions. What it means? It means that some part of the procedure SQL code can execute inside an independent transaction context, its own transaction context. If everything has executed without errors, these independent transactions will be committed automatically. Otherwise, if some error has been thrown, it will be rolled back. Autonomous transactions feature is available for procedures, triggers, so you can define some procedural trigger to be executed entirely in the autonomous transaction context, or you can specify any block of code, begin and block of code, to be run in the autonomous transaction inside your some particular procedural trigger. Also, execute statement feature now supports parameters. So you can specify not only just plain SQL text to execute, but to use parameter placeholders and then specify concrete parameter values for this statement. Another quite minor maybe feature is the ability to specify literals of both numeric literals and string literals using the hexadecimal format. For numbers and for strings, I have provided examples. Here's just an example of how to use an autonomous transaction. For example, in a trigger. OnConnect trigger uses autonomous transaction to insert some data into a log. And even if this triggers fails, for example, not allowing some particular user to connect, this record inserted into the log will still be committed by the autonomous transaction. Now, the next slide shows a complete syntax for the new execute statement feature. So it adds input parameters and it offers to execute cross-database queries. On external data source, clause is used to specify a connection string to that database. If this clause is omitted, you are connecting to the same database. You can specify whether to use an autonomous transaction or common transaction, which means that the same transaction context is used, and specify user password credentials. Maybe just 5, not more than 5. I will set a minute. Okay. Currently, in Firebird 2.5, this extended execute statement facility allows only connections to the same Firebird server or another Firebird servers. But future Firebird versions will also support cross-database queries using, for example, connecting to other databases using JBird provider, only DB provider, or anything like that, ODBC driver. So you will be able to connect to Oracle databases and so on. What else Firebird 2.5 offers? What other features does it offer? Monitoring extensions, 2 new monitoring tables. One of them reporting you all the context variables defined for all the connections and transactions active inside the database. And the second one reports memory usage. It's all the levels. It's just the same as the performance counters monitoring tables that you see in Firebird 2.1. So memory usage can be seen as globally, or for how many bytes are occupying for a particular connection, transaction, user request, and so on. Also, you are now allowed to disconnect whatever connection you need by just deleting from table mode attachments. Also, Firebird 2.5 is expected to have some tracing facilities. This is mostly the so-known trace functionality developed by the RedSoft Corporation. They have provided this code to the project, and we are currently analyzing this code and hope to include this feature into Firebird 2.5 release. It allows to configure a detailed audit and trace the entire activity, well, not maybe all the activity, but the one you selected, to be written into some kind of log. It could be a log file, or the log could be dynamically shipped to some external driver to be stored elsewhere. Mostly Firebird 2.5 it's not yet ready for production, but its first alpha release has been done a few days ago. We expect to have a beta release of Firebird 2.5 in August, and we expect maybe around the New Year holidays to have a final release. But that's only Firebird 2.5. Now what about Firebird 3? So what is expected in Firebird 3? First of all, it's a unified architecture, so there will be a single code base for all the architectures, and you will just be able to configure the Firebird server to work in the mode you need. It could be dedicated process mode, similar to what we know as classic. It could be multi-threaded mode, and it could be with a shared cache or with dedicated cache. So you will just be able to tune the Firebird behavior to your particular needs. And what features are expected for Firebird 3? First of all, we should mention external stored procedures, functions, and triggers that can be developed in Java, C++, Delphi, or whatever language of your choice. Now this feature is almost ready. We are just discussing some last changes and maybe some interface things. So this is really for sure is almost ready for the Firebird 3. Also, a long promised SQL functions. So I mean the ability to write not only procedures but also functions in the SQL language is also expected to be implemented in Firebird 3. Also, we are hoping to see the enhanced security solutions in this Firebird version, both developed by the Firebird team and the ones that are currently being tested in the RedSoft version of Firebird. So you should expect some really strong improvements in this area. And of course, we will be continuing improving the optimizer. There is some demand on the bulk loading facilities that would allow to perform a batch load in a very quick time. And we still hope to have some solution to either allow longer metadata names or to offer schemas or both maybe. It's not yet decided, but we really hope to offer something like that. And a few words about the cooperation with the RedSoft Corporation. As you perhaps know, they have released the version of the RedSoft database yesterday, and it offers quite noticeable features. We really communicate with them. For example, the super classic mod they also offer and they release has been developed by Firebird team and tested with the help of RedSoft. All the patches of RedSoft regarding the incremental backup facilities go into the Firebird tree. And, well, I have mentioned that trace functionality is also developed by RedSoft. And we hope to see their latest security enhancements in our tree as well. We will discuss that during the next month.
involved, ou, por exemplo, questões universitárias, assim como outros e da rapidez vai ser a desenvolver transformado ao longo do ano e outros recursos da área de segurança que foram disponibilizados na versão que era realizada são pedidos
And as for the enhanced security itself, this slide mentions just a few of options implemented by Redsoft that we expect to get back to Firebird for the next Firebird release. Mauricio, you could just read them. Read just this. When we have a detailed plan about the security enhancements, I'm sure we'll publish this information with more details for you to read about. And this slide speaks for itself. It's just a release plan for the nearest future. You can see that we are expecting to see Firebird 2.5 beta soon. A few point releases. Previous Firebird versions will be released this year as well. That the Firebird 2.5 release is expected to come. It's the release candidate stage this year. And around the new year, maybe after the holidays, we expect to see the final release of Firebird 2.5 and to see first public releases of Firebird 3. Because Firebird 3 is already in development for many months in some details. We will be branching the new development fork code base for this release pretty soon. So there's really progress being made. Все, последний слайд. Oh, sorry, one last slide is remaining. Sorry for being a bit late.
Did you meet Adriano?
No, yes. She didn't get to me.
Need to check how could Adriano told me that he knew Adriano and talked with him. But you know, Adriano is an animal from the forest. He has a lot of
And finally, what to expect after Firebird 3 and Firebird future releases. It's quite hard to predict it right now. We don't have a detailed feature list. But the things we are interested in are features, such major features as a write-ahead logging, point-in-time recovery, maybe some optimizations or enhancements in the multi-generational architecture implementation. Another features being discussed by the team are table partitioning, SQL debugging facilities, better conformance to the SQL language specification, and a lot of internal optimizations regarding both the data access parts, optimizer, just maybe some tuned algorithms internal, and so on. So that's all I wanted to say you in this session. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yes, it's also considered by the project. We have some ideas how to implement materialized views, but we just didn't come to the implementation stage yet. Yeah. Not currently. There is a work in progress about having the Firebird compilable on a Windows compact edition platform, but it's not ready yet. We hope to have at least the client library working there, but I cannot promise for sure about the server yet. Maybe the future will show, maybe it will be easier than we think right now, but there is some work about, there is a work going in this direction, but only about Windows. Oh, excuse me? Yes, there are such plans, but I believe that our replication facilities will be based on the binary log after we implement the write-ahead logging. It would be the most efficient way to replicate data. Another possible solution is to use incremental backup and replicate at the page level. It's also an option, and maybe it's easier to implement right now. We will be considering that, but we just don't have it scheduled for any particular Firebird version to be available soon. Once more, please.
When you're working with new architecture, it's all single process, so you have crashes.
Yes.
You want to know if there's a way around that.
Actually, there is no good workaround the same way as in the super server, but we have some ideas to how to process some kinds of error conditions unexpected gracefully, and maybe only to disconnect just the guilty attachment and leave others still running. But we just need to test our ideas before offering them in public. It still don't maybe allow to survive all the kind of crashes, but maybe the most common ones. For example, crashes in the UDF libraries. Yes, we do have plans for remote protocol improvements regarding both compression and encryption, but not in Firebird 2.5 definitely, maybe in Firebird 3, but no promises right now. Currently, the only solution is to use the ZBD software. Okay. This session called with much more questions. It will be available in Firebird 2.5.
said that act about the possibility of all this work that's being done and more people working on Firebird, if the contributions are being able to sustain the project, or if there's ever been any thought of making Firebird more free?
Really good question. Well, my answer is that Firebird will never get not free in any kind, so it will still be open source and will still be free of charge for any commercial usage, regardless of how much contributions are made. There is theoretical possibility that some individual or company will offer some contributions requiring some license or so on, but we are free to reject that and implement it by ourselves. So far, I don't see any really. I don't expect any such things to happen, honestly. Just a few words to add that, of course, some company with much more human resources and technical resources can fork the Firebird code base and sell it as proprietary product. But first of all, it's not that simple from the legal point of view. And second, as we see, for example, with Redsoft, they don't want to go this way. They prefer to be friendly with the Firebird community and to work together. They get some benefit from the early features. They get some money for them, but anyway, they're still interested in having the single code base. So the Firebird still evolving and still benefiting from their work.
And communicate that Microsoft releases the full version of the Firebird database to the fund.
I know. He told me that 1 week ago, that he was going to announce their release just these days when I will be there. So I just checked your site yesterday, not for this morning, not typed that they have released, and now this is why I have told it right now. We're completely out of time.
This is for your next answer.
Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I was glad seeing you here. A lot of people interested in Firebird. Great Brazilian community. Thanks for you coming here and listening to our presentation. Thank you.